Welcome to this episode of Substantial Matters, Life and Science of Parkinson's. I'm your host, Dan Keller. At the Parkinson's Foundation, we want all people with Parkinson's and their families to get the care and support they need. Better care starts with better research and leads to better lives. In this podcast series, we highlight the fruits of that research, the treatments and techniques that can help you live a better life now, as well as research that can bring a better tomorrow. Many people enjoy travel to see family and friends, revisit favorite places, make new friends, or experience new sights, cultures, and cuisines. Travelers would probably agree with Mark Twain's admonition that broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. Parkinson's disease may be a challenge, but with proper planning, enjoyment of life, including travel, can go on. Today's guests emphasize the importance of planning for extra time for tasks, for medication timing, extra medication supplies, for unforeseen delays, and for alternate plans to deal with today's commonly disrupted travel schedules. Being prepared is a great stress reducer. Our guests have valuable insights into travel with PD. Occupational therapist Julia Wood is with the Lewy Body Dementia Association and has also worked in the Parkinson's area for several years. Rebecca Miller is a clinical psychologist at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, and lives with Parkinson's. She had traveled to Boston, where we spoke. Let me ask you first, Rebecca, how old were you when you were first diagnosed with Parkinson's?
I was 39. My daughter was 9 months old, although I'd had symptoms for probably about 10 years previous.
When you travel, what sort of things do you have to do differently, or what's changed from, say, before you had symptoms?
I think one of the major things that's changed is planning. So I start early, start often, just to make sure that I have everything organized, making sure that I have everything ready to go. I traveled up here from New Haven to Boston today, and when I left my house, I had to do a mental checklist basically to say, do I have my credit card and do I have my meds? Those are the two most important things. So I think that's the other thing, is making sure always to have my meds.
Is it more burdensome to do the kind of planning? You've said you have to make sure, and it sounds like this is an effort.
It is an effort in a way. I think it's just, breaking it up into small parts over a longer period of time. So it used to be that I'd be able to just kind of throw everything in a bag the night before and feel comfortable and walk out the door. And now some of that is maybe getting older. Some of that is getting wiser, I hope. And some of it is having a kid. But I think it's also that I know that if I'm not feeling that well right before I need to go, that I'm not going to be able to manage right before. So I have to start earlier.
I've traveled a lot to medical conferences, sometimes as much as once every 2 weeks. And it was like reinventing the wheel every time. I just hate packing, How old's your daughter, and do you travel together at all?
Yeah, so she's now 9 years old, and we do travel together. We just recently, took a trip up from New Haven, Connecticut to Great Barrington, Massachusetts, which is not that long, but we still got organized early. I think one of the harder trips was when she was around 9 months old or so. I went solo with her to Seattle. So that was a real challenge, along with just trying to get myself organized, get her organized, and then get on a plane, etc.
Traveling with a kid that young looks like a big ordeal anyway, getting all the stuff together.
Yeah, but then we'd layer on top of that just the fatigue with the Parkinson's and the kind of juggling my own symptoms. It was a real challenge. I got to Seattle and I kind of fell into my brother's arms, who I was visiting there, and just started crying because it was really overwhelming. But I don't want to let it stop me from traveling, because traveling is something that's important to me, important for me to do with my daughter.
How do you plan around the fatigue? And since you mentioned Seattle, how do you plan around time zone changes, especially with medication and sleep?
No, it's certainly a challenge, especially 3 years ago. I went to Kyoto for the World Parkinson's Congress, and that was definitely a challenge. And in fact, that's when I really started using a timer for my meds. So I do every 4 hours. So regardless of where I am in the world, I know that every 4 hours I need my meds. And since I take my meds on a 24-hour cycle, I'll wake up to take them during the night as well. So that 4-hour timer system worked pretty well for me.
Do you find that airports or train stations are particularly stressful? Would you prefer to drive, or doesn't it really matter?
I think it depends. I mean, driving has its own set of challenges in that my symptoms start increasing, then I'll need to pull over if I don't feel like I'm able to drive safely at a certain point. And then just driving is exhausting. It is nice to have control and, go to exactly your destination in your car. But I think that fatigue aspect and, I recently had DBS in this past September, so that's helped a lot. I'm feeling more and more comfortable. But prior to that, it would be very challenging when driving, especially dyskinetic or off, not feeling like it was safe for me to be on the road.
Do you think there's things you haven't figured out yet to your satisfaction?
My impulse is to answer, no, of course not. I have everything figured out. But yeah, traveling is an aspect that you always have kind of tips and tricks to make it easier. And I think I'm still working on figuring out what those things are. There was just recently a panel discussion on travel for people with Parkinson's, and hearing other people's tips and tricks is really helpful. So that's always, getting that kind of peer support around it is always helpful.
Julia, what do you recommend that Rebecca may not have thought of yet, or that you've encountered from people?
It's funny that she brings up planning, because that's the number one thing, I think. It's plan early and often. Also, though, I think another point that could be made sometimes is working with your medical care team to help you plan for that. You may need the help from your doctor to have different notes for use of different medications or medical devices that you need to bring. I think also physical therapy can be great for helping with tips and tricks around navigating with maybe using an assistive device in the airport or for once you get there, because often I think that people take for granted using an assistive device is not an all or none. It's not that once you use a walker, once you use a wheelchair, you have to use it all the time. Maybe you just need it for getting from point A to point B for this one thing, and that's okay. And then also as an occupational therapist, I worked a lot with people on how to plan around their fatigue, how to plan around their med cycle, how to pack and plan, having checklists, sometimes packing cubes, things like that can help organize your packing a little bit more. I think it really depends on the individual. There's a great article by a researcher named Erin Foster and Joan Toglia where they talk about the strategy around cognition, where you look at where the challenges might be and what could you do differently? How could you approach that differently? And I think that's a great strategy for most anything. Where do you think there might be challenges, and what can you do to meet those challenges?
One thing I've seen suggested about assistive devices is put your name and contact information on everything, because in travel, all sorts of things go to the four winds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You don't want to end up with someone else's trekking poles or walker or wheelchair.
What about stiffness during travel, sitting for a long time, and what do you do to relieve it then and afterwards?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think number one is trying to get up and move as you can. You can even do seated mobility exercises, just tapping the toes, tapping the heels. So you're moving at the ankle, maybe marching in place before you try to get up on the airplane or get up on a train to move, stopping if you're in the car and taking some movement breaks. I think that's really, really important, just to kind of, the motion's the lotion, keeping the body moving as much as you can.
You find that, Rebecca?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think another thing about planning is planning extra time for things. So previous to Parkinson's, I might try and schedule myself very tightly in terms of when I leave, when I get there, et cetera. Like I can, be able to make it, all these kinds of things. But now I like to give myself some extra time on either end to try and have that, because I know I'll need to rest or, have the chance to kind of settle in. And then in terms of assisted devices, I love my fold-up cane that I can just stash in my backpack so I can have that if I need it. And it kind of whips out, unfolds into a nice device. So that's helpful.
Exercise is highly recommended in Parkinson's. How do you exercise on the road? What can you do?
I think that's something that you can, number one, talk with your physical therapist or your occupational therapist, maybe even your exercise professional, about kind of having a packet of exercises that you know you're going to do on the road. You can check ahead and see if there are, gym facilities or exercise facilities wherever you're staying and plan with that. Some hotels even now have it where you can rent exercise clothing when you get where you're going, even shoes and things like that. So I think that, once again, it's that planning piece again that Becca mentioned. So really thinking ahead about when are you going to do your exercise. Trying to stay on the same schedule is also important with your exercise as well as your meds if possible, and keeping that routine going.
It's too bad they don't have people you can hire to do the exercises for you.
That's what everybody would love.
What about knowing about and taking advantage of accommodations at train stations or in airports or things? Do people not know about them or ignore them when it could actually be pretty helpful?
I mean, I think especially at airports, getting to ride in that little cart. To start, you might feel a little embarrassed about it, but I think there's a certain point where, at least for me, I've given up that kind of embarrassment for, just that it helps me so much if I can take advantage of those kinds of things. Things like using the handicap parking pass that I have. Even if I'm feeling good when I pull into the space and put up the placard and I'm a little embarrassed that I get out and walk, I'm okay when I walk out of the car, but I know that there's always that possibility that when I come back, that I need to plan ahead for myself and know that that's a possibility for myself and take care of myself in that way.
Do you have an aware and care kit? Do you take it with you if you do?
I do have an aware and care kit. I have taken it on longer trips. I just was suddenly embarrassed that I hadn't taken it today, but I'm just here for one night. But yes, I do have an aware and care kit. I'm actually an aware and care ambassador. So yes, I'm very familiar with it and very happy to take it with me.
Never needed to use it?
Oh, I have actually. Yes, I have. Unfortunately, it did come in handy.
What are some ways that either of you know about to make travel less stressful? How can you plan ahead that lessens the stress?
I think plan for the worst and hope for the best. It's not that I want people to perseverate on the negative, but really thinking about what obstacles and what barriers and challenges might come up and feeling like you're really prepared for those. What happens if your meds go off? What happens if you have freezing of gait? All of those things that you can really plan and feel like you have kind of a plan of attack, I guess, of going into. I think that really helps relieve a lot of stress and anxiety around travel, and then will help people feel more prepared as well.
What about planning nonstop flights and or carrying extra meds in case you get stuck somewhere, or a prescription or a letter from a doctor explaining what's going on? Are those all helpful things?
Yeah, I find that for sure. I mean, I tend to take my med bottles, with the original prescription information on them, as well as then packing doses of meds in different places just in case, so that I have it directly on me as well as in my luggage, not checking my meds, for example, but instead keeping it in my carry-on just so I know that I have it. And letter from the doctor. I have one of those in my aware and care kit also for COVID-19 accommodations, in particular, in case I am hospitalized. And I think, and as Julia said, just planning ahead. Being a single mom and traveling with my daughter, there is a lot of anxiety at times, thinking about if I do have some kind of accident or hurt or symptoms come up while I'm on the road, that is nerve-wracking. But I think thinking those situations through ahead of time and coming up with a plan and talking to my daughter about what are things that you can do if mommy's incapacitated, that helps me feel better as well as helps her feel like she's more in control.
I think it's important for people to know, too, that in addition to having that carry-on bag and that personal item, if you have assistive devices or medical equipment you're taking, that doesn't count in that. So you can have those items additional to your one carry-on and your personal item. And I encourage people really conscientiously pack that carry-on item. Think of the things you don't want to be separated from and put all of them in that bag so they're with you all the time. And really keeping, I think, a tight rein, so to speak, on how you pack and prepare and plan so that you feel confident knowing that you have the things with you and you won't get separated from the things that you need to have.
And I suppose if you've brought your medication with you, you should be bringing a little bottle of water with you or something, knowing you could get some juice or something to take it. What about health insurance? How portable is that, especially if you're traveling outside the U.S.?
It really depends on your plan. And I think it's important to check ahead of time with your health insurance plan and see what your coverage is. Also, sometimes with travel insurance, you can get different types of plans or things to cover you when you travel. I know right now there are even specific COVID-19 travel plans that you can get that provide coverage if you're hospitalized somewhere in another country. So I think that it's a good idea to think about that and look at options for when you're traveling so you make sure you've got all your bases covered and you feel comfortable that you could access healthcare if you need to. You can also reach out to the Parkinson's Foundation helpline too to see what maybe centers of excellence are in that area or people that are in the network that you could maybe connect with if you need to.
Anything interesting or important to add from either of you? Maybe in a nutshell advice or just something we haven't covered yet?
One thing would be just don't give up your dreams of travel just because you have Parkinson's, that you still can do it. And there are ways and all kinds of accommodations, and that people are so willing to help generally when you ask.
I think that's such an important point, that not giving up things that are meaningful. I get on my little OT soapbox a little bit that every time you give up something that's meaningful to you, you give up all of the therapeutic benefit of that activity. So with travel, there's cognitive aspects, there's all the stimulation, there's enjoyment. So it really does enrich our lives in a lot of ways. And so think about maybe even if it's someone that you don't feel comfortable traveling internationally anymore, but maybe there are places within the United States or, closer that you want to travel to. So I think look at still, how can you participate in that activity in a way that's meaningful? And even think of it as like a therapeutic activity, that you're working on all these different skills with your mobility, your communication, your socialization as well.
Very good. Very practical advice. I'm sure listeners will get a lot out of it. Thanks. As both Rebecca and Julia noted, planning and preparation are the key to enjoyable, lower-stress travel. These are the variables that a traveler with PD can control to deal with the other possibilities that no traveler today can control, such as delayed or canceled flights, changed itineraries, or weather emergencies. Carrying extra medication is imperative, and knowing you have a contingency plan for unexpected events or delays can help reduce stress. A preparation checklist may also help. As you think of things in advance of the trip, jot them down in one place, then be sure to keep the list for future travel. As Rebecca mentioned, she has used her Aware and Care kit on occasion. These kits contain a medical alert wallet card, medication forms, a hospital action plan, and more. If you would like to order one, call our helpline or go to our website at parkinson.org. Click on the 3 stacked bars at the upper right, go to Resources and Support in the drop-down menu, and click on Hospital Care Kits. The medication forms alone can be useful for travel. As always, our helpline information specialists are available to answer questions in English or Spanish about today's topic or anything else having to do with Parkinson's, including finding your way around our newly redesigned website. News and updates about future events and resources are available by joining our email list at the bottom of our website's homepage. If you want to leave feedback on this podcast or any other subject, you can do it at parkinson.org/feedback. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate and review the series on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. At the Parkinson's Foundation, our mission is to help every person diagnosed with Parkinson's live the best possible life today. To that end, we'll be bringing you a new episode in this podcast series every other week. Till next time, for more information and resources, visit parkinson.org or call our toll-free helpline at 1-800-4PD-INFO. That's 1-800-473-4636. Thank you for listening.